All right. Welcome to the McLean Hospital Crafting Support Project 2025 Family Webinar Series. I'm Dr. Julie McCarthy, and I'm a clinical psychologist and researcher at McLean Hospital. Tonight, I'm very excited to have you with us for our special webinar to end out this year, our Family Recovery Night, sharing stories of hope with Sean Driscoll, his father Dave, and Aunt Barb. And before we begin, I'll go over a few reminders. People are welcome to change their names for privacy or make any questions or comments anonymously. And please enter any questions that you would like answered. Just know that we'll answer questions toward the second half of the presentation. And we ask that you use any polls that may come up or respond to any prompts live when asked, so this can be a little bit interactive. And we'll be recording the presentation tonight and the Q&A discussion, and we'll let folks know when the recordings become available. And to continue to improve the webinar series, we encourage you to complete a brief, anonymous, and completely voluntary feedback survey to share your thoughts at the end, your preferences, and ideas for future webinars, because we're already starting to plan for next year. And some of this information really helps us for quality improvement and may be shared anonymously in the future with researchers or people who are interested in helping us support folks in their search for family services. So I'm going to put this link in the chat in case anyone needs to run early. Okay, let me put that up there. Okay, great. And so for those of you who have been maybe not with us for some of our past webinars, I'm going to run through our agenda. We are first going to talk a little bit about the webinar series, then we'll move into our sharing stories of hope, then we'll have the Q&A and a few minutes for closing remarks at the end. So what this is something called the Crafting Support Project. And part of why we have this is for oftentimes the people who end up looking for services from people like me or webinars like this. So I am going to start a poll in just a moment, and I'd love to see who we have with us here tonight. So hold this up. Okay, so the question is, what best describes your role? Family member, person with lived experience with mental health challenges, clinician, none of the above, and you could also have intersecting identities as well. So feel free to put this in if you like. And we'll give folks a few more seconds to share your role if you feel comfortable. And we'll close the poll in 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Okay, so we have 100% of people who responded identify as family members, and then about 8% of folks also have personal lived experience with mental health challenges. So thank you so much, and we appreciate you being here. Okay, so why we have this series is because at some point or another, we may have been in the position of wanting to find help for ourselves or maybe someone who we care about. And we may not have known exactly where to turn or what resources were available to us. And so with the support of our generous donors, we've been able to put together this webinar series to really help spread the word about resources, evidence-based approaches, people's lived experience that could be helpful for you and your loved one to navigate your own mental health recovery. And one part of this is our webinar series. And so you had a number of excellent topics this year. And we have recordings from the past couple of years online on our YouTube channel, Crafting Support Project. And we'll be soon having our 2025 webinars on there as well. The other part of this is our one-on-one work that we do with family members. And so right now we have a service called the McLean Crafting Family Support Program, and this is open to Massachusetts families. And this involves time-limited, skills-based individual therapy for about 8 to 10 and sometimes up to 12 weekly one-on-one sessions with a coach or therapist like myself. Typically, we meet on Zoom, or it could potentially be in person. And this is something that we're offering throughout all of next year as well. And if people are interested, feel free to get in touch with me. My email is on the screen, jmccarthy@mclean.harvard.edu. And this is insurance-based because we wanted to make something as accessible and sustainable as possible. All right. So now I'm going to turn things over in a moment to our panelists today. So first up, we're going to be hearing from Sean Romero Driscoll, who's a mental health professional, musician, and entrepreneur who trains peer support specialists at the University of Maryland School of Medicine, where he was once a patient himself. With over 9 years of experience in the mental health field, through the use of his own vulnerability, he advocates diplomatically, ensuring that everyone's voice is heard along the way. Through his company, Be Limitless, he built a social emotional learning that helps people understand themselves in order to better understand one another, creating a kinder culture and world without limits. Who doesn't need that? So, Sean, would you mind taking it away and sharing your recovery
Hi.
story?
Yes. Thank you for having us, Julie. Yeah, so as Julie mentioned, my name is Sean. I essentially I was given up for adoption at birth because to my dad right here, my adopted dad and my adopted aunt there, my aunt Barb, who I consider my parents because they were the ones here. But biologically, my biological parents both had mental health issues and substance use issues. From my birth father, my birth mother had been hospitalized um, about 70 times before I was born, and had me at 44 years old. And so um, my parents raised me with unconditional love. My I got a sort of a second chance before having a first in a way, and they knew that I had a higher chance of having a mental health problem because my psychiatric history from my birth family. And sure enough, when I was about 15 years old, I was at Eastern Tech High School in Baltimore County, and I got my first psychiatric break, and I had a lot of sort of racing thoughts. I wasn't sleeping. I was running on adrenaline. I had some delusions and was confused about certain things in my life. I had an obsession to like learn this really deep information, which is interestingly enough, it is something that I still enjoy, but it was very overwhelming, and I was like I couldn't function, and so sure enough, I had to get hospitalized, and I spent 2 weeks in the hospital, and then I went back to school where I played basketball, and I only played one more game because after I played that basketball game, I ended up right back in the hospital for about 3 weeks. And then I still wasn't well after I got back to school, and I had 5 weeks worth of makeup work. And so, sure enough, ended up back in the hospital for 4 weeks after that, and it was really challenging. I spent my 16th birthday in January in Shepherd Pratt, which is a psychiatric hospital in Baltimore, and so I had a relatively good experience at Shepherd Pratt. My parents came to see me, and another aunt of mine, she ended up visiting with me, and I was very grateful for having that support, and it made a huge difference. Amidst stabilizing and work with the school, I was able to essentially get exempt from the third quarter of school, and I ended up passing based on my first, second, and fourth quarter performance. So I didn't have to make up the work, which is a special accommodation, and that also kept me moving along with my peer group, which was really helpful. I also joined, that was also with the advocacy and help of the Coordinated Specialty Care Program, or the Maryland Early Intervention Program at Ray's at University of Maryland Medical Center, which I was a part of for about 3 years from 16 to 19 because of how intense my psychosis was and the hospitalization history. So the early intervention program helped fuse the principles of family and then the team itself to really ensure that I got the best possible treatment that I could during a really challenging time. And it was really an integrative model that helped ensure that my family was supported, and that I was supported in transitioning back into life, which was really hard at that point. I had severe cystic acne in high school from side effects. I had tremors. I had weight gain, and I wasn't playing basketball anymore. I had, it was a lot of really tumultuous situations. So a lot of reintegration back into school was about managing my emotions and learning how to, deal with all that. I was on a bunch of different medications, lithium, risperidone, Depakote, in the hospital. And then I got weaned off of most of them except for Depakote and Abilify outside of the hospital, in the coordinated specialty care program. And then I was on Abilify, the injection, for a long time before it stopped getting covered by my insurance. Um, uh, and so, but then I went on Abilify for a long time, and I've been on that. I wanted to start speaking around 18, and also pursuing music. I wanted to use music and speaking to help people. And at 20 years old, I got my first job in mental health as a facilitator, in residential crisis services with some special trainings. And I was wanted to give back in that way. And some years later, I had been working in the field, and I ended up working on an assertive community treatment team with the psychiatrist that I had, Dr. Ann Hackman. I am allowed to say her name, Dr. Ann Hackman. I ended up working with her in a very unique circumstance as the peer support specialist on this assertive community treatment team, helping folks with severe mental health problems. And she was my psychiatrist when I was a patient many years prior in that coordinated specialty care program, one of the clinicians that really heard me. And it was really helpful at that time. One of the unique parts of my story, uh, at 27 years old, I made a change that I had never seen done before. Medications had a significant place in my life for a long time, but I was unfortunately impacted by a lawsuit with Abilify, which was hypersexuality, binge eating, and compulsive gambling. All of those things I was impacted by, without unknowingly, for about 9 years. And then when I did know, I decided that I wanted to do things differently. And I decided that I was going to find my own path to recovery, which made everyone around me very nervous. And so it required a lot of patience on the part of my dad, my mom, and my Aunt Barb. My Aunt Barb was the relative that really trusted my voice when it was really hard for people to understand why I was doing things differently. I was 275 pounds at that point. I'm 185 pounds, and I'm currently as stable and as at peace internally as I've ever been. And I am med free, and it takes a lot of work. I haven't drank alcohol since I was diagnosed, but I'm very specific with gut health. I do the sauna and exercise, and I have to do certain things, and it takes a lot of work. And I'm not anti-med, but I found my own path to recovery. And my Aunt Barb was one of the voices early on that really trusted my voice when I would say certain things, because a lot of times people were looking from a lens of their experience with other relatives. As my dad, I know his mom and my mom's mom both had schizophrenia. And so some other relatives sort of sometimes would look at it from a lens of confirmation bias. And in my dad was also very supportive. In overall, I think it made him very nervous, and it was scary when I decided to do this as an adult. And now at 29, I'm turning 30 in January. It'll be 3 years in January that I will have been found this path, the naturopathic or alternative medicine medical approach. Um, but through that process, it has been a really beautiful experience where I've been able to advocate in that way that, we all have the right to our choices in recovery, but also medications had a place when I didn't know. I didn't know what to do, or I didn't, when I was really sick, I needed to stabilize on meds. And there is a risk with all of it, and that's the point that I often carry with me in my journey with recovery. So I think that puts me right at my time, and I'll Julie.
Thank you so much for sharing your story. And so we're going to continue this story by turning things over to Dave. And Sean, you and I can kind of ask some questions of Dave to kind of hear what his perspective was like. So my first question to you, Dave, would be, what are some of the things that you noticed first that made you think that, Sean could use some help when he was in high school?
Actually, my wife and I received a phone call from her younger sister.
Okay.
Okay. Sean Ann was retired from the Baltimore County Fire Department. She was a firefighter paramedic, and she had to start a new career path. And she had just taken a course on bipolar disorder. And Sean had been talking with her, and she had called my wife and I and said, something's going on with Sean. I believe he's bipolar. I just took his course, and he's showing the symptoms we just went over in the course. I think maybe you have to get him to the hospital. So my wife and I convinced him. We went to a area hospital, a local hospital over near Towson, and we spent the night. We went to the emergency room, and they diagnosed him, and then we had to wait for him to go over to Shepherd Pratt, and almost they didn't have at first. Shepherd Pratt didn't have a bed for him. Then they did. And then that's when he was diagnosed with us. And this happened like 3 days before his 16th birthday. And this was not having somebody with, mental health issues was not something new to my wife and I, because my mother was a paranoid schizophrenic and a manic depressive. And her mother was schizophrenic, my wife. So we were told, when we adopted Sean, we were told there was a 50-50 shot that he could suffer from mental illness because of it. And we said, okay. And once we got to diagnose, he got diagnosed, and then of course there was, like he said, he was in and out of the hospital for 2 weeks at a time. Then his longest stay was 34 days. As a parent, it's a possibility. You hope for the best, but prepare for the worst. That's the best way I can describe it. You don't dwell on what if it happens. You can't, because you're not gonna function. But once he was diagnosed, and I looked at my wife and says, well, we've been here before. And we just, all right, what do you need us to do? What do we have to do? And the social worker told us, when you come to visit, she warned us there'll be times you can walk in, he'll look at you and say, I don't want to see you, and don't take it personal. You can, and that happened a few times. It hurt, but you have to accept it. We've had, my wife and I both had coworkers and friends go, how do you do that? I said, how do we not? That's our son. He needs our help. So good, bad, or indifference, we're going to do what it takes to get him well. And that's what we're going to do. So
I wanted to ask you, with your mom, as you mentioned, your mom having schizophrenia, how did this situation remind you of that, and what was different? And in combination with that, sorry if it's too much, but advocacy, how did the advocacy that you were able to do for your mom differ? Were you able to advocate for your mom in the way that you were able to advocate for me when we got into the RAISE program?
No, because my dad was the one who handled all that. My mom was committed quite a few times to Spring Grove State Hospital and to Brownsville State Hospital. We would go there and visit, but I was a child, up into my teens. This is something dealt with all the way up until my 20s with my mom. And but it was my father usually handling that. We would, we'd go visit my mom and everything and try to give her support. But mental health facilities and treatment for people suffering from mental health is moved ahead leaps and bounds as to what I was exposed to as a child, as a teenager, and into my early 20s.
Mhm.
because some of the places weren't the best, unfortunately. I
Mhm.
mean, that's the way it was.
Mhm.
Okay, and we had to cope with it. My late brother, sister, and I, and my dad, we had each other to cope with, because when you're children, you don't understand what's going on.
Mhm.
Also, something's wrong. You know something's wrong with mom. You don't know what's wrong.
Yes.
I'll
And
tell you
what,
a story. In Baltimore City, when I was a kid growing up, on Monday afternoons at 1 o'clock, all the city firehouses had air raid sirens. They would test those air raid civil defense sirens every Monday at 1 o'clock. And if my mom was off her meds, which was frequent, she'd either throw them down the drain or throw them in the trash. And those sirens would go off. She'd grab us, make us go down to the basement, lay on the basement floor, because she said the Russians were shooting nuclear rockets at us.
Mhm.
how do you
But
think that experience helped you for, like, I guess, experiencing what I went like when I got diagnosed? How did the experiences that you had experienced help you understand what was happening and then also deal with what was happening?
Well, I hate to sound this way. To me, it was, when you were diagnosed with, bipolar, it was familiar. It was, because I've been there. I've been there so many times with my mother. The question is, all right, what do you need us to do besides support and love you, to be there for you for what you needed? And that's what I was bound and determined to do. Whatever it takes. But also let you know that, this is an illness, not your fault. And as the people pointed out, you got to understand something. This is really physical. It's a chemical imbalance to the brain that causes this. So it's a physical ailment. So, let's treat it. And move on. You were in the emergency room the night of that Aunt Teresa told us to, we should take you over to the emergency room. And I was sitting back in the psychiatric hold area, and you asked me, says, Dad, what am I going to do? And this is what I told you. I said, Sean, because you were in the basketball, you were JV basketball in high school. I said, Sean, you know what we're going to do? We're going to get together. We're going to formulate a game plan. We're going to follow the game plan to its end. And that's what we're going to do. And you took a moment or two and you said, okay, Dad, we can do that. And that's what we did. I mean, whatever they said we needed to do, we did.
Mhm. And
I knew I had to love you. I had to support you. That was a no-brainer. That wasn't even in question. I was going to do it no matter what. So,
Was it hard when I didn't have was it hard when there were things about what you wanted that you couldn't control that you had to allow me to learn on my own? And what did that look like?
yeah, it was hard, because you had one, because of your mental illness. If you're going to try something on your own, how much effort you put into it would depend on how much stress you were under, and a stress was a trigger. You could have a relapse. The question was always, do I step in? If I do step in, when do I step in? That was hard. A lot of times, it was very hard, because I didn't want you to have a relapse, but I wanted you to keep on the path of getting well and staying well. And I did everything in my power to keep your surroundings and everything stress-free as possible. Wasn't always successful, but I knew that would help.
Thank you
Also,
so much. We're going to turn things over to Aunt Barb, if that's okay, and we'll still have time for more discussion during the Q&A. Thank you so much,
okay.
Dave and Sean.
Thanks, Dad.
All right, Aunt Barb, you are up. I guess you've heard Sean's perspective, Dave's perspective, and we'd love to hear from you too. What do you feel like helped you as you were supporting Sean through this process?
I um I remember him being admitted to the hospital and trying to get up to see him, and I was not on the visitor list. And I remember taking that very personal. And what I've learned since then, it wasn't about me. It was about Sean and his care and making sure he had the right care. And so that was pretty great. I thought they handled it very well there. And um, so when he came out, we started seeing each other again, especially after high school. And he got into the music game, and he and I sang together a few times because I'm a singer and he's a singer. And we even performed in church at Christmas time and things like that. And so we've had a very good uh, relationship since he was a baby. And so it's just been a very, very nice. And when he stopped the medications, he's right. People were a little nervous, but I knew I could trust Sean. I always believed what he said, and I knew I could trust him. And it's worked out really great for us, and he's been doing wonderful.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about the trust component because I think the reason that you and I are so close today is because you heard me as a human before you heard the worry or different things. And I also, you heard the plan. Like I wasn't just, I'm going off meds, but you heard a plan. You heard my voice aside from just the action itself and what you knew about me from that lens. So
Mhm.
um, talk about how challenging, I guess, was there challenges associated with that in keeping in checking, even like in the way that you talked about the hospital, right? Like you had to
Mhm.
step back and be like, this isn't about me. I have to hear what's happening. I only had 3 visitors I could put on the list. I was grateful to
Uh-huh.
have extra support around.
I thought you picked good ones.
So what did that process look, what does that process look like for you and being able to step back and listen, I guess?
I I am not sure. I guess I probably learned that from my mom. And she was always very much about, not making everything about herself and about caring about others and unconditional love and those kind of things. And after a while, I didn't know you had a cat. Um, anyhow, so when we got the chance to sit down together, you and I, and you had a chance to explain to me what your process was and why you were doing what you were doing and what your plan was, and I knew you had it all mapped out. And so even though, somebody who really loves you a lot, I was a little bit nervous, but I totally trusted that you had thought this through and were doing what we thought was best for you.
I always found you to be very, thank you for sharing. I always found you to be very good at asking questions,
Hmm.
and really seeking an understanding in that way. When I was first diagnosed, how did you feel that did our relationship change when I was younger? Or like, did you feel like there were ways to be able to understand me at that time? And what did that look like?
I think in your later years, your teen years and stuff, most of our communication was not in person. I remember a lot on the phone. And I remember you calling me and talking to me about your rap. And well, Aunt Barb, well, you're talking about cuss words and using cuss words in your music. And I kept saying to you, Sean, if you offend your audience, they're not going to hear your message. So, if you use those words and it's offensive to somebody, you've totally lost that person. So that was my point. And yours was like, probably, I'm going to guess that it was because other people were doing it. And so that's just what you do in rap. Um, I don't know, but I remember that conversation and I remember how intense you were. And that was before the hospitalization happened. But that's one of the first times I noticed anything really different was because you were really, really, insistent. Well, Aunt Barb, but well, what if that's what you need to do to say what you want to say? And I kept saying, if you offend them, they'll turn it off. They won't listen to you.
And that says something about your character and your ability to communicate because that says that you're thinking about how people receive information, which is why you were so good at, like, as an adult, I've come to appreciate you more and more. I've spent a lot of time with you in person as an adult, and you were the calm aunt. I had other aunts that took me, you took me places, but I went camping. That wasn't you as the aunt. But what I've come to appreciate as an adult was your calm, peaceful presence that I needed so much more of, you know, away from, different other types of people that can be around sometimes. And you're very intentional in that communication, and that kind of goes hand in hand with that. I wanted, Julie, did you have another question that you wanted to
I
add?
I did. Some of the families that we work with say, "Oh, well, I would trust my loved one if I knew they had a plan." So for you, Aunt Barb, in thinking about that you had confidence or trust in Sean having a plan, what were some components of that plan that gave you that confidence or trust?
When he talked about it, and he was very specific about what he was going to be doing when he went off those meds,
Mm,
and he started working out like a lot. It
mhm.
wasn't like I would have been going to the gym once or twice a week, maybe, but he was like pretty much every day.
Okay.
I can't remember. Did you take a day off once in a while?
I had to learn that I had to, because I got this. I started, well, in the first 6 months you're learning what works. So, but yeah, it
Mhm.
ended up being like an every other day. It was at least 5 days a week. And if I
Mm-hmm.
went to the gym on the other days, it would just be for the sauna. So I found a schedule that worked. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So he was exercising a lot and just trying to change habits. And I've known him to be on fruit cleanses and things, and really, really thinking about his health and what's going to make him feel better physically. And just really, I've been so impressed that he's gone through with what he said he was going to do. And
Mm,
I know a lot of people that don't.
fair enough. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Sean,
Um,
do you mind if I
Go
ask
for
you
it.
a quick follow-up question just to clarify? When you had made the decision to go off of the medications yourself and put together this plan, how much of that was more on your own, or how much did you consult with your prescriber at the time or a therapist if you had a therapist?
The reason that I went off meds was because a year prior I had asked the psychiatrist, I said, "Hey doc, I feel like I'm feeling a little, I had a gambling addiction that I had to
Yeah.
quit." And I was feeling, he chalked off my sexuality at the time as like, "Oh, well, you're a young man." He never told me about this class action lawsuit. And for me, I had seen everyone with mental health problems in my family all on meds and never living a normal life.
Mm,
And I had been on this med for 10 years, and for most of my 20s, I didn't even know who I was anymore. I was
mhm,
hopeless. And I worked 3 jobs and funded vices and that medicine was impacting a part of my brain that was like fixated on impulsive things, and it's supposed to be
mm,
keeping me stable. So I'm like, well, screw
mm,
this. And this is crazy, but I watched videos of David Goggins, who talked about pushing, conquering your mind or pushing beyond what you think you're capable of. And I went to my friend had been offering to take me to the gym for about 5 years. And I was like, well, I got this new job where I could breathe, and I had more money and less clinical responsibility. So I was like, well, let me try something different. So I went with him every morning at 5:30 after never going to the gym. Every
that's
morning at
impressive.
5:30, and he had a back and biceps day, a chest and triceps day, and a leg day, and we'd rotate the schedule. And and I and that was my new commitment, and I had to. I didn't I had a big enough reason to keep with it when it sucked, because for the first 3 months I hated it, but that was my medicine. Between that and then, and I cut out fast food and soda at that time. And now I'm mainly fruitarian, fruit, nuts, seeds. There's a science behind that. But over time, I found more extensive things. I'm sensitive to the energy of meat. I'm sensitive to the energy of food. I'm a highly sensitive person. It's a gift. It can be, of depth in thought. and emotions. I just had to find out on my own that I could harness it. And then I looked into Eastern culture, and I realized later, I was like, wow, this people actually look at this differently other places. And so I fused those principles here. And that's kind of how I did that. It was very like I had never seen it. Like no one that I looked at online had done this. I just found a path that way.
All right, well, thank you. So now is our time to turn over questions to the audience. If you have any, please feel free to put them in the Q&A, and we'd be happy to chat with our panelists about your questions. So one of the questions that we have in the chat, we've already started talking about, which is, hearing about some of the alternative things that you've also found helpful. And even for the folks who do take medications that I've seen or worked with, medications alone are not, a golden ticket necessarily to where people want to end up. Oftentimes it is a combination of how we take care of ourselves in terms of our lifestyle, who we talk to for social supports and whatnot. So, someone else specifically was asking about saunas. What gave you that idea to include that as part of your wellness plan?
That was random. My friend
Appreciate
was
your honesty.
my friend was a firefighter, and he was at Planet Fitness. Or no, he had access to the gym, a bunch of gyms, because they incentivize firefighters to work out in Baltimore.
Makes sense.
And so he took me to Planet Fitness, but then LA Fitness, we went to LA Fitness another time, and after we worked out, we got in the sauna, and I was like, when I left the sauna, I had never experienced it, and it was about 140 degrees in that one. It wasn't too bad. Like the one, some of them get up to 160, 170, 180. That was actually like, it was reasonable. And I was like, wow, I feel like it actually incentivized me to go to the gym. Like it was like my reward at the end. It felt so good. And saunas, well, you sweat out a lot of toxins. I felt instantly less anxious after 30 minutes, 20 minutes. I mean, it really is a game changer. And I would fuse that with cold showers later, and I would do sauna, and I still do that to this day. It's one of the most instrumental things, and it's cardiovascular as well. You're actually exercising, even just sitting in there. So it's an easy way to get your heart rate elevated, your toxins flushing, and that directly impacts your mental health because of the hormones that are being released at that time.
Well, thank you so much. And yeah, people are sharing, that you have a very inspirational story, and it sounds like things are going so well for you, and certainly, your family supports that you have. One of the questions that has come up from family members who also have a loved one, bipolar disorder, is, well, what if symptoms come back, for instance? And that could look different for different people. So for you, what would be the things that you would look out for, or that would be a sign that, maybe tweaking the plan or updating it might be helpful? Like, what would your signs be?
I want to say how difficult it is to be objective with myself in that first year. Because sometimes you might have a plan ahead of time. And this is one strength that I have that was not always easy, even having a strength of being able to look at myself objectively, but I had to be honest with myself. One of the things, as I mentioned, there was a day that I went to the psychiatrist's office. He said, "Hey, Sean, you're a little bit hyped up here." It was about 6 months, and this was about in July. If I went off in January, he said in 2023. So I lost some weight by here to about 40 pounds. He said, "Sean, you getting enough sleep?" And I said, "Yeah, doc, blah, 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 blah." I had pressured speech there. And then that night I noticed, oh, I didn't sleep that well that night. That night I only slept a few hours, and I was like, well, I can't go to. I remember because I had been to the gym 10 days in a row at that particular set of days. So I was like, oh, so I immediately took 3 days off. And so the amount of there's an awareness that this, it's work, and it is a risk, and it's work. But if you understand, a lot of what I talk about is like how I did it and the amount of awareness that it truly takes. And I had support around me, and I had to be willing to say, could they be right? It was really hard because I also felt at the same time that I wasn't given a fair chance to even try without people telling me I shouldn't. Like it was very lonely.
Yeah.
But but it was the level of awareness, and it was like really, and it's not easy, but I needed to try something different. Now they have like people that do the keto diet. There's a whole subset of people that understand the gut health and the gut mind correlation too. But
Mhm.
yeah, those are some things. Racing thoughts and sort of pressured speech or not sleeping. These are some key indicators for that.
Thank you for your honesty, and I'm sorry that, it felt like a lonely place there for a little while. And also I'm so glad that you found the level of awareness that worked best for you. Listening to other people, checking what you were noticing yourself, and then finding that balance that made the most sense.
I'm wanting to mention this other part in that
Mhm.
I'm also very excitable and I'm very charismatic and I'm a great speaker in general. And so early on, that was also a challenge. Like people would see certain aspects of people would see that I'm crying and they'd assume that I was depressed because I'm not taking my medicine and that I should go off meds.
Hmm.
Or people would see me express a normal human emotion and they had it in the back of their mind that and that was the part that made it particularly frustrating and lonely because there were times that were legitimate, but I was going to therapy weekly. I was going to my psychiatrist every 2 weeks at one point. So it's like
Mhm.
I was still in treatment and people wouldn't hear that because they had their own preconceived judgments based on experiences they've had from other people in the past and even me when I was a teenager. I got
Mhm.
treated like a child often.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, I think that's such an important point, that treatment doesn't mean symptoms are on or off like a light switch. And even if someone's in treatment or taking medications 100% or off, we all have variability. And I think it is tough sometimes for families to know what is human fluctuation in emotions, in stress, and sleep sometimes. And yeah, I think understanding and keeping an eye on what's going on totally makes sense. And also, it does come with a, a little bit of an individual or family calibration of accepting some of that variability too, when it makes sense. Um,
And that's a strength of my dad and my Aunt Barb. My dad, even though he had his concerns, he
mm,
also there's a lot of trust. They're not neither of my parents were controlling. And I
mm,
think that a lot of times we confuse controlling and worry with um, mental health care. And honestly, that's what drives people away. My
mm,
parents were very good at allowing me, like setting boundaries for what they expect in their household, but also like trusting that, like for instance, when I dropped out of college, right? Like, oh, well, you got to get a job. Okay, great. Of course. Or if, like, but there were like, if you want to live under this roof, there are rules, right? But also, they heard me. They
mhm,
heard me, and even if they didn't agree, or they allowed me to try, and
mhm,
and because of that, we've drawn closer as opposed to me pushing them away and feeling. But I also had a plan, and that's for clients to see. It's not a one size fits all, and it's definitely takes a lot of sacrifice.
right. Thank you. And I think that speaks to the next question that came through. You've made a heroic effort in self-improvement to help mitigate your symptoms. And this person asks, how did you find the incentive to do so? And more importantly, how did you stay consistent with this path? Because you were putting in a whole lot of effort, and that would be tough for anyone to do. What's helped with that
I
incentive and
appreciate
that
it. Very, it's
consistency?
a very thoughtful question. And also thank you, Lisa. I meant to say that in the chat. Um, for the question here, I think that the incentive was that I didn't want to end up in the hospital. Like
Fair enough.
I knew the odds were kind of, listen, I was 275 pounds, and I always say that in life, in order to change, you have to have a big enough reason why. And
Mm,
for me, I had just gotten a promotion from my experience of working in the field for 7.5 years. I had 3 jobs. I went down to one job because I got a big promotion at university. working under Melanie Bennett, who, that's how we met, Julie,
Oh yeah, one of
from
my
a
past
conference in
advisors.
Chicago.
Yep.
But I had just gotten this promotion and I'm like, wow, I didn't know I could make this kind of money with my experience. I fit the niche perfectly. I was, and it's like without going to college, in mental health, because, music is different. But so I was like, I gotta figure this out, and it's like, and so what really propels me now is like my brand. My brand that I built is be authentic, be limitless. And it's not about a lot of misconception that can come if I'm not careful with linguistics, is that I'm anti-med. I'm not. I'm not anti-med. I always talk when I speak to high schoolers, I'm very explicit in the way that I portray the message. I'm not anti-med. I'm anti you're going to do recovery this way, and I'm anti one size fits all, and I'm anti not knowing the risk of any path, right? And finding an appropriate time to relate to clients there, and so I'm a bridge builder in that way of teaching how we can do this collectively, and so that was my incentive. And so the brand and the message that I stand for is what pushes me to go, I'm a little bit extreme with certain things, but in a healthy way, in the way that I carry myself. I do water fast. I've done like 3-day water fast to give my digestive system a break, which is science behind that. The body starts healing itself. I've done fruit is hydrating and astringent. It pulls plaque from the body. So there have been things that I do that are odd, but also pulled from other places in the world.
Sure. Sounds like you have a lot of open-mindedness to things and a very balanced approach in terms of how you talk about this with others, because you're right, it's not a one size fits all. So one of the questions that just came in was about a comment you made regarding what were some of the key boundaries that you found were right for you. Because I heard you say that there were certain expectations in your household, and also you really benefited from having the freedom to try things. So what were some of the key boundaries that you felt like worked for you?
I think patience in the process. I think that the margin for error was like my parents gave grace, which was helpful. And I don't know if that's necessarily considered a boundary, but I would say that allowed me to want to, as a child, if I'm thinking about this from a childlike standpoint, because when I go off meds, and I've been treated like a child for a long time in terms of taking your meds, or like, not that my parents did particularly, but that's the um, often when it's looped into being a teenager, there wasn't really a moment for me to really come of age in a certain aspect. And so this was an opportunity that because of the patience that my parents had with like seeing me through the process. They saw me cry like a lot early on. Like it's hard. I had people that I had hurt, from being imperfect, like with this whole, I cheated on an ex-girlfriend that I had, and I felt really bad about it. So when I went off meds, we had broken up at the same time, right? And so it was really, really hard. It was like literally no choice to go figure it out with the gym or something, but my point is the boundaries became, and the boundaries with regards to this that were, I guess, helpful was just communication and just being able to my dad wanted me to, I guess, talk about how things are going. I needed to be in therapy, obviously, which I had no problem with. I still saw my psychiatrist. The boundaries were also somewhat self-imposed, right? Like they were like, for me, I had a level of awareness that I wanted these things. And I think that my parents being able to be not controlling allowed me and empowered me to not want to rebel against that. Like also, like I wouldn't say that I necessarily would have definitely wanted to rebel against that, but oftentimes when we helicopter, it really pushes our youth away, and it can, and so my parents made me want to respect the boundaries because of how loving through trust they were, not control.
Thank you. And this could be for any of you. Say if someone has a loved one who may not have the level of awareness that you did and may not want to go to therapy or see any doctors, and may be in a position to need some help, what would you recommend that they say or do to help their loved one perhaps consider getting some additional support if they do not have such a well-laid plan, as you were able to put together?
Do you guys, I mean, did you want to, I've been talking for a while, Dad, do you want to answer that one or no? It's okay if you didn't have anything, I have something too.
I mean, if you have a family member who needs help, the hardest part's going to convince them that they need the help.
Right.
And it's for their benefit to seek the help.
Mm-hmm.
If they don't want to reach out and get help, they're not going to do it.
Yeah.
They're not.
I think oh, go for it, Dad. I'm sorry. My bad.
With our situation with Sean recognized that he had a problem. He may have resisted, but talking to him and letting him know to help him become aware of what's going on with him and his surroundings, how it would benefit him.
Mm.
And that's how we were able to get him to get the help. And like I said about an emergency room, I told him, well, let's get a game plan together, and this is all going to benefit him. Let's get the plan together and then execute the plan.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
just keep working on executing that plan, not the pressure. That's the short time he was in Shepherd Pratt. I'd seen parents who totally ignored their child. I actually watched in the visiting room one time a mother cussing out her son because she has to come here and see him because he's effing crazy. Her words, not mine. When she threatened to beat him up, I had to go over to the nurse's station and tell the nurses what she had done. They walked over and told her to leave. Get out.
Mm-hmm. I'm so sorry that
I think the teamwork that you were able to, you said about the game plan, Dad, you really helped make sure it wasn't you talking at me. It was you connecting with me. Right. And these are probabilities, right? Nothing's guaranteed. We happen to have, through all of these things, you set me up for the best chances for success because of your ability to connect and work as a team as opposed to telling me what to do in a lot of instances, right?
Yeah. I mean, your illness affected the whole family as a whole, and we had but the end result was it was for your benefit, not ours, yours. Even though it was a team, the goal was to get you well, to get you down your path in life. That was the goal, in my opinion. Okay, and that's what Mom and I worked for. There was times it hurt. It did. I mean, it's natural. You go to see your son, you look at it and you look at him, I don't want to see you today. You turn and walk away. That crushed your mother and I, but we were told to expect it. We did, and we had to adjust.
And awareness was a process for me also, right? Because I saw the thing in the chat from Jenny. I think with adults, right, like families that are dealing with adults that are still living in the home or different things like that, I think there are going to be things that you need for your own peace, and you can't force people to get help or be aware. And there are going to be things there's going to be boundaries that families are going to have in different, like my story, our story is our story, but there's going to be different situations. And some people are going to have boundaries, especially if there is an effort put on by you can't force someone, in other words,
you can't.
in their recovery. And if that affects your health or your household, you might have to set boundaries with certain aspects.
And one of the sadder things is that even parents will not believe that their child is suffering from mental illness. They won't. And it's true. It's right there in front of them, but they'll deny it.
That's such
and if
a
they
good
deny
point.
it, okay, if they deny it, they're not going to help their child. Okay, there's going to be resistance, and that's not good.
Well, I'm going to pause us here because we are kind of getting toward the end of the time. Did you want to answer that question about
Just
trauma?
no trauma in the not in the typical not yeah, no, not it wasn't a big part of my story. There have been traumatic things that have happened in my life, but not in the significance of my story, no.
Thank you so much for sharing. And thank you for all of your perspectives. It's been so valuable to hear what this has been like for all of you, and also very inspiring to hear how supportive and open the communication has been, and ultimately to hear all the great things that you've been up to, Sean. And the folks that you work with are very fortunate to have you in their corner too. So I'm going to pull up some final slides for our closing remarks. One of the things that I wanted to close with is a poll question. You can put this in the chat. I believe it should be working today. What has given each of you who's on the webinar today hope for recovery for yourself or for your loved one? We can hear any examples if people care to share. All right. And as people are thinking about what may have given you some hope, whether it's what you heard tonight or something positive about your loved one, I'll just share, if people are looking for additional support through McLean at least, there are a number of different family support groups that are available to folks, including through our first episode program On Track, our general family support programs at McLean. One's focused on addiction, also a wellness recovery action plan with Lisa Charlin. And we also have one-on-one support as well. If you just want to talk to a family member who's gone through this too, Joanne Grady Savard is a great contact for that. And somebody had put in the chat that something that gave them hope is hearing their daughter laugh again. So it could be as simple as that, to give someone hope. And so as I mentioned at the beginning, we have a survey where we can get feedback from all of you about what you feel would be supportive through these webinars for you. So if you'd like to check that out, the QR code is on the screen and you could take a moment to fill that out. I'm also going to put that in the chat. And someone else had shared that not being alone, and Sean, you're sharing your passion for life and living a good life on your terms is something that gives hope as well. And also wanted to mention, if folks are interested in learning more about Sean, he has his Instagram account. I think it's in your name on the screen, correct?
My Instagram and YouTube, and thank you for that comment, Lisa. It's very touching. But my Instagram has a lot of self-care content and a lot of like how I've been able to do certain things and advocacy type of stuff. So wanted to put that there in case it might help.
Awesome. Thank you so much. All right. And I wanted to thank everyone who made this webinar possible, certainly our panelists, the folks who have contributed to the research that helped us get different supports for family members, our national funders, and certainly our philanthropic support, without which this would not be possible. And so we have good news. We are supported to continue this Crafting Support Project Family Webinar Series. Next year, typically we run from April through November, and we'll continue on Thursdays, 5 to 6 p.m. Eastern time. And we are in the process, as I mentioned, of creating our topic schedule. So if you have any ideas or someone who you think could be a great addition to our webinar speaker series, or someone who has lived experience, that could be yourself or someone that you know who would want to share their recovery stories, please feel free to have them get in touch. We would love to hear more of what's been helpful for folks and what could be helpful for others in our community. Oops. All right, so if anyone has any final questions for me, feel free to get in touch. And thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate you all being here, and we look forward to seeing you more next year. All right, have a good night, everyone.
Thank you so much.
You too. Thank you.